Yeah, I asked that. I feel like I could skip over to the next one, but like, why do you think it is so appealing to Christians? No, like, if it does devalue the message, if it does get at this intellectual, sort of takes away from the intellectual message that is unique to Christianity, why is it so popular with Christians then? Like,
I
what
think
do you think is it that easy escape, that easy answer that humans are want to thrust into our lives in the place of this really hard work that is meant to be what is supposed to separate, the secular person from the non-secular person?
well, Star Wars is ultimately incredibly deistic slash theistic, right? So it is incredibly compatible with, so it affirms for a Christian the supernatural. Let me contrast it with Star Trek, which you recall growing up. That was the competing worldviews, right?
My wife is
And
a
so, yeah. But Trekkie in the Star Trek universe, they've outgrown religion.
yeah,
Religion in general is pocket superstition.
yep.
Everything Star Trek is entirely geared upon if there's something mysterious, let's find out the answer to it.
Science-based. It's very science and let's
Right.
understand it.
Star Wars has a lot of conceits that theists love. Star Wars, first of all, there's a conceit that there's something beyond what you see that is real and true and actually controlling everything and holding everything together. There's a deist. The whole universe is just the DNA of it is a deist universe, and the whole Star Wars universe actually even acknowledges some people call the Force by different names, but the whole universe just acknowledges upfront supernatural power. Then there is the notion that there is black and white, good and bad. Good and bad can be in its own almost nouns. There is good, black and white, bad. And you pick a side and that's where you are. And that is very Christian, simplistic, moral thinking. Good, bad, black hat, white hat. So, and the people who are on the bad side of things will ultimately lose, and the good side will ultimately win. And only through personal redemption can you move from one to the other. And if you go to the other, it's got to live for religious language. You fall to the dark side, you all those kind of things. So it grants as the backdrop what theism wants us to grant. It wants us to grant objective morality. It wants us to grant the supernatural. So those come for free in the Star Wars universe. And I think, and those in other science fiction universes that are more science based, that's the antithesis of what they are. So they were able to embrace it. And it's also, I think there's something about the fantasy genre. You have your J.R.R. Tolkien, your C.S. Lewis, and Star Wars is closer to those than it is to Arthur C. Clarke, right? So
What do you what do you think it is about genres? The J.R.R. Tolkien's, the C.S.'s, your Frankie Peretti's, if you will.
mhm.
Like, what
Oh
is
man,
it? I had to throw that in there for you.
yikes.
Um, what do you think it is about these books that just people to run to them? Is it because every single one of these things is so different, yet they're so the same. And I think this may come back to what you were talking about at the top of our podcast with these common tropes and myths that appear and are centralized to these things. But what is it about the need for us to couch our stuff within almost just the ludicrous, right? Like if you were to go back into like the 1500s and like tell them, all right, about 600 years from now, we're going to talk about theology through the lens of Marvel, Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings. And they would probably just have this blank look on their face. One, of what the hell is that? And two, like, how on earth did you destroy what makes religion great? I mean, because for them, the Marvel was just actually reading out of the Bible, right? Like, are
I'm
you
gonna push back on you only because you picked a weird year for that.
okay? Go
Uh,
ahead.
so would you not say that the Arthurian legends
Okay, fair enough.
were doing the identical thing? It was taking Christianity, King Arthur speaking to God. looking for the Holy Grail, wrapped up in Catholicism, was out on the similar quests to convert people and to save the world and then to slay dragons, depending on which Arthurian legends you're talking about. But I feel like what we're really talking about is an indictment of the Bible to capture the Bible stories themselves don't actually capture generation and generation and generation of what we have in our heart is the storytelling need, the hero journey that we need, all those kind of things that we aspire to. The Bible doesn't fundamentally meet those. And that's why generation after generation after generation comes up with Narnia or comes up with all these other Mordor, like these allegories Peretti you mentioned, like, would those honestly be needed if the Bible met our literary needs? And it just doesn't.
Well, I
And
don't think
so
it
that's why the Bible, to be fair, wasn't, I guess, technically intended to do that, right? But you also see, even in Jewish oral traditions and in all these other things, there were other stories going around. Like Homer's Iliad, there's the Aeneid, there's all these other stories that were being told around, and it wasn't the Bible stories. The Bible stories are all these
they're stolen
morsels,
from these other.
morality morsels, right? And we haven't got into that, but depending on how you view these things, yes, they were borrowed, or at least if not stolen from, in reaction to the other stories. So I think this just a fundamental literary failure of the Bible to tell a narrative. So the Jesus narrative doesn't do anything for us, right? Because none of us are the son of God. So we can't put ourselves that, but we could all discover a wardrobe. We could
Yeah,
all be handed a ring to help destroy the earth. We could all be handed a lightsaber. We could all,
we
we could
could all
all,
be a Spider-Man. Anyone could wear the
right.
mask
We could
now.
all be bit by Spider. We could all be adopted by Bruce Wayne. It's just like those are the those stories tend to resonate with us because they are somewhat aspirational. The Bible stories are not aspirational. Now,
It's about the fact that we think being adopted by Bruce Wayne is a more likely event than the stories in the Bible. I'm not getting adopted by Bruce Wayne anytime soon.
well, you're a little old. And you don't look as good in tights, perhaps. I'm not sure.
I think one of the reasons I do so enjoy listening to you speak is because you remind me of my high school English teacher in just a way. I'd think I'd have something just really brilliant in my head, and then you just have the ability to flip that on its head and get me to think about something from another perspective. And I really enjoy that because it's not something that I get to do very often. But yeah, I do think that for me, if the Bible had met needs, I don't think that I would have sought so many morality tales within the X-Men, within
Right.
Spider. I
Yeah.
don't think I would have sought them out. And I don't think I ultimately would have said, for me, this makes more sense to me than this. It's not that I wanted to disbelieve the Bible, it's that it didn't make as much sense to me as some of these other things that we come across. And I think at the end of it, that's sort of like that gets to the heart of what you just said. Like if it wasn't the failure of the actual text, wouldn't see reason to seek it out elsewhere. Like when did you come to that realization? Or have you just been fortunate in that you've always realized this?
No. So
Sure.
I laugh because you say, you have this ability to flip all these things. You got to realize that for many, many decades, more than I care to admit, I was completely I didn't understand any of it. I was in the whatever pastors told me, was just taking it as face value. This is all in since 2016 that I've had to basically reconstruct a worldview from nothing that I can now recognize. So this is all fresh and recent for me. So if anyone in the audience is like, we all need to rebuild our worldviews, and it's embarrassing, frankly. Some of the times, some of the things that our former selves used to believe. I guess we need to sometimes give our former selves a bit of a
Oh,
break.
right. Yeah.